Hi everyone, welcome to Topic 4. Topic 4 is going to be covering GDP, which is Gross Domestic Product. I have some ancillary resources for you right here for you to review. You also have the Topic 4 quiz. Now let me go over some of the concepts in Chapter 23, or GDP. Now when we look at GDP, we're looking at the Gross Domestic Product, which is looking at what is being produced in our economy. Now there are four main components of GDP that we're going to focus on: consumers, businesses, government, and the international sector. And when we depict this, we want to look at the circular flow diagram. The circular flow diagram is a good diagram to connect firms and households. And they are connected in two different markets: the market for goods and services and the market for factors of production. The market for goods and services is going to be like the product market. That's where firms supply goods, households buy things. The market for the factors of production are where households supply the land, labor, capital, which is the factors of production. Firms pay for those factors of production, and they make factor payments. So the money households earn in this market, they use to spend in this market. Now, when we look at GDP, we're looking at the market value of all final goods and services produced within a country in a given time period. It's important to note that the GDP is a key indicator of how our economy is doing. So we have to measure the market value. We also are measuring final goods and services. We're not measuring intermediate goods. We're measuring final goods and services. So an intermediate good would be a good to make a final good and service. So for example, I have bread. To make bread, I need wheat. Wheat would be the intermediate good. Bread would be the final good. But we only include bread in the calculation. GDP is also evaluating or calculating all goods and services that are being produced. Goods are things that we can physically touch, and a service are things that are performed. It's also looking at what is being produced in the current year. So that's key. Within the current year, within our borders, and within a given time period. So what is produced within our borders in a given time period? That's really the key that we're focusing on when we look at GDP. The components of GDP are consumption, investment, government purchases, and net exports. Consumption will be the largest component of GDP. Consumption will be spending by households on various goods and services. It's made up of 70% of consumption in our economy. Consumers are the main driver of our economy and the main driver of economic growth as well. So we have to figure a way to stabilize and stimulate how consumers will respond in markets. Investment is going to be looking at businesses. Now, business is not investing in the stock market, which a lot of people think about. Investment is spending on machines, inventories, and buildings. So that's the investment component of GDP. Now, government spending is kind of like consumers, but the government spends money just like consumers. They spend money on various levels. The things that are not included in GDP are things that are not produced. So transfer payments, such as money that's given to individuals for services that are not conducted, are not included in GDP. The last component is net exports, which is the international sector. Net exports is made up of exports minus imports. And when we look at net exports, we're focusing on the large trade deficit that the U.S. has experienced in the last couple years. This trade deficit has a very big impact on the growth of the U.S. economy. So let me show you the impact of GDP. If you look right here at this diagram, you'll notice that here's total GDP. 70% is developed, or it goes towards consumption or consumers. 20% is government spending. 13% is in business investments, and net exports is a negative 4%. So you'll notice that consumption is really a main driver of economic growth in our economy. That's an important thing to evaluate. Now, some of the different things that we're going to look at are some of the different scenarios. And let me go through some different scenarios. Debbie spends $200 to buy her husband dinner at the finest restaurant in Boston. If we look at that, you'll notice that Debbie's spending money on a service, and given that it's a service and it's part of consumption for consumers, it increases GDP by $200. It's part of the consumption component. Sarah spends $1,800 on a new laptop to use in her publishing business. Okay, that again, that's an investment of $1,800, and net exports will fall by $1,800. So GDP is unchanged because it's an investment in a business. However, it's also a component of net exports. Jane spends $1,200 on a computer to use her in editing business. She got her last model on sale for a great price. So now, think about this. She got a last year's model on sale. That is not in current GDP because of the time period. Make sure to focus on what's being produced within our time period. And the last one, General Motors builds $500 million worth of cars, but consumers only buy $470 million. This is looking at inventory. So GDP, consumption rises by $470 million because that's what consumers buy. Inventory only rises by $30 million because that is the unsold amount. So GDP rises by the $500 million. So those are just some of the components that we're going to be focusing on this week. And that's some of the different areas that your quiz will be covering. If you have any questions, please let me know, but I look forward to your effort.